Update on the 750. If you recall, it was in pretty rough shape when I found it. You can check that video out. I'll put a link down below. Got it running, put it to work out at the farm, put a good 12-15 hours on it. But there were a few problems that cropped up. The fuel tank was full of crud, some black flecks, and so kept clogging up the fuel filter. The fuel tank was leaking somehow. Turns out it was a fuel return hose that was leaking. I was worried about the transmission hydraulic oil being pretty old, so I wanted to change that, wanted to flush the radiator. That front tie rod down there that links the front steering, that was bent, hitting this bolt right here. So I straightened that out. One of the big problems was with the wiring. Some of the lights weren't working. It's amazing things were working as well as they were because under here around the fuel tank was packed full of mouse nests. Actually wrapped all the way around the fuel tank, down in here where the wiring is, and all the way down in here, every place just packed with nasty mouse mess. And so I cleaned that out and found that the wires were, many of them severed, badly damaged. That's why some of the lights weren't working. So basically rewired all that, or patched up the harness as needed, got everything cleaned up and put back together. And then I painted because there was a lot of rust. You can see even down here, some of this is even rusted through. Very rusty. This is pretty weak. Painted this shroud. Oh, the bands around the fuel tank were completely rusted through. So I made some new bands out of aluminum. Catch a glimpse of one of them right there. There's one of those new fuel tank bands. And replaced all the hoses, all the fuel line. So I pulled the fuel tank off, cleaned it out, replaced all the fuel lines, a new fuel filter, new fuel line over here, replaced all the sections of this return fuel line all the way back to the tank. That one was leaking. My fuel cap was letting water in because this lens was broken. So I got a new lens on there and cleaned that up so you can actually read the fuel indicator now. Flushed the radiator, replaced this line. I think the radiator hoses are okay, so I left those. This front battery pedestal was badly rusted back in here. I pulled it off, cleaned it up, painted it, put it back on, painted this front area of the frame. These bolts were badly rusted, put new bolts on it. Pulled the hood off, cleaned everything out and repainted the hood inside and out. Repainted these grill components because they were rusting. Painted this front screen, it was rusting. Even the battery connections, this was rusted and ugly, so the battery tie down, painted that. Put a new seat on it. The old seat was just completely shot, rusted. Found this seat. This is not for 750, but the dimensions matched well enough, and I was able to put some brackets on the bottom and get that seat in pretty good shape, hooked up. All of these components down here on top of the differential were just really rusted, looked pretty gnarly. Cleaned them up, put some rust inhibitor on and then some green paint. Same with the hydraulic control here. Pulled the fenders off. Had to run entirely new wiring to some of the lights. I don't know if you can see that. Yep, new wires. These were severed, so replaced those. Had a hard time getting ground on the lights since I'd painted them, so it took a little bit of effort, but got all the lights now are fully functional. This one doesn't look like the original. It's just a trailer light, but it's sufficient. So the rear floodlight hadn't been working. That's working. The bulb was fine. It just wasn't getting a connection. Headlights are working. The flashers, hazards are working. And only one worked before. So all the lights are now fully functional. including the light in there in the tack. So that tack will light up at night. So that's nice. 3-point hitch. No painting back here, but I just cleaned things up. You know, and down in here, it was just full of crud. Just kind of really gross. None of these linkages would move. They were all rusted pretty solid. So pulled them off, greased them up, broke them free. And this top point of 3-point hitch especially was very rusted. Nothing would move. I'd put it in the vise and put a pipe wrench on it and really put a lot of leverage on it to even break that free. But now that is loose and greased up. These chains were pretty rusted and they were a little too short. It was annoying, so I lengthened them just a bit and greased them up. So those are nice and loose. Oh, obviously I painted up the wheels. There was a lot of rust on the wheels, so brushed them up pretty good, put some rust inhibitor on them, and then a coat of paint. The only thing left is the weight rack is bent, and so these weights actually can fall off. Gotta find a way to straighten that. Lubed up the steering. So the steering is really nice and free right now. So yeah, that's about it. Ready to take it back out to the farm and put it back to work this spring.